Breaking tonight, a cold air funnel cloud spotted near Pullman. A ton of you reached out to us with photos today. The National Weather Service says the funnel cloud was reported after a thunderstorm in Whitman County. Look at those pictures. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Hanrahan. Our Whitney Ward joining us from home tonight. Hi, Whitney.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, those funnel clouds are always kind of fascinating when they do hit in this area. They're not completely rare because we get them a couple times a year, but definitely always exciting when they come up. They're always just fun to watch, and those pictures are always pretty dramatic. I know our Thomas Patrick, who is filling in for Tom Sherry this week, has definitely been tracking all of the developments, whether or not it actually touched the ground. They're still trying to figure out. So, Thomas Patrick, good to see you. And what do we know about this funnel cloud so far?
Yeah, good to see you too, Whitney. And here's the thing. When it comes to cold air funnel clouds for the inland northwest, really 99 times out of 100 they do not reach the ground as a tornado, so they're usually pretty they're pretty safe. They're not a dangerous feature, but this might be that 1%. I've been talking with the National Weather Service. We're sharing information to determine if this has touched the ground as a tornado. We had a couple reports of such, so we're trying to verify that. Check out some of the new pictures that just got sent our way. This one comes in from Derek from Sunnyside Hill in Pullman, looking west towards that funnel cloud. Really impressive sight. Again, it gets pretty close to the ground, but we can't 100% tell if it is on the ground. Kind of the same thing with this picture from Barb, same thing out of the Pullman area, just taking a couple miles south of there. That funnel cloud is extending very, very close to the ground, and that actually makes it kind of in that upper echelon of cold air funnels. Usually they don't even get that close to the ground, so we're still working with the National Weather Service in Spokane to see if that did actually become a tornado, because that's the definition. Once it hits the ground, we start defining that as a tornado. So that was that storm that occurred just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, but there's a few others across the inland northwest between Ritzville and out towards Moses Lake and Othello, a couple thunderstorms that are dropping some very heavy rain, and they're not really moving very fast. So some minor flooding is possible across portions of central Washington, from Grand Coulee through Soap Lake down towards Moses Lake and Royal City. So we'll be monitoring that for the rest of the evening, but there's a whole lot more rain to come later on in the week as well. So a full breakdown of that part of the forecast coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, sounds good, Thomas. Thank you very much. Also, it was on this day 40 years ago at precisely 8:32 a.m. that Washington became the center of the deadliest volcanic eruption in U.S. history.
Exactly right, Whitney. 57 people tragically lost their lives in the Mount St. Helens eruption. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, most of the people killed in the eruption likely died from asphyxiation after inhaling hot ash. Destruction from the blast caused more than $1 billion in damage all across Washington. There's some places that we would all recognize that look completely different on this day 40 years ago. On the day Mount St. Helens erupted, the entire city just coated in ash, and Spokane wasn't even the hardest hit area. Here is a look at a map from the U.S. Geological Survey. It shows where and how far the ash from the eruption went. The yellow parts, where Spokane was, had a smaller amount of ash compared to some other parts of Washington. And take a look at this video from Washington State University. It shows the Pullman campus covered in ash, students walking to class covering their faces. Look at that van right there. Cars kicking up several inches of ash in the streets, making it pretty much impossible to see the roads. It almost looked like a fresh powdered snow. Now, following the eruption, President Jimmy Carter visited eastern Washington to see the devastation firsthand.
Of course, east of the explosion was where most of the dust has settled, and this is a very troubling problem for us. In the area of Ritzville and about 40-mile radius around there was the heaviest concentration of this fallout material. It's 3 to 5 inches deep. Transportation is still obstructed in that area, and of course here in Spokane there was about a ½ inch of the material deposited on the ground.
The Ritzville area had the most ash in eastern Washington. It's about 195 miles away from Mount St. Helens. Up to 5 inches of ash fell there, almost twice as much as in Yakima, which is only about half the distance from the volcano now compared to Ritzville. The Mount St. Helens eruption was the first eruption in the continental U.S. outside of Alaska since 1917. It went on for hours and ultimately caused about $1.1 billion in damage. More than 900,000 tons of ash were cleaned up around Washington and surrounding areas in the days and weeks that followed. Here's a look back at the timeline of events.
May 18, 1980, 8:32 a.m., a 5.1 magnitude earthquake strikes and causes the largest debris avalanche ever recorded. The volcano erupts in an outward fashion. Eruptions blast through the landslide, accelerating debris to more than 300 miles per hour. Geologists and Spokane residents Dorothy and Keith Stoffel had chartered a Cessna flight over Mount St. Helens. As their plane flew overhead, the mountain began rumbling and suddenly erupted. Believed to have been the closest to the mountain during the time of the eruption, Keith Stoffel managed to capture the moments before and after the blast on film. Washington State Patrol also had a plane in the air. A wall of mud, boulders, and logs plows down the valley. Mud flow washes over banks, smashes buildings and bridges, and strips away trees.
The wind carried the ash cloud into eastern Washington, turning day into night. It reached Spokane by noon. A gray, gritty ash storm.
You got any place to go?
Right. Are you going to church?
Might not be a bad idea.
Here's a look at what it was like behind the wheel driving through downtown Spokane. You might recognize parts of Main Street and other major intersections. The iconic Spokane landmarks, the clock tower and pavilion, barely visible on this day in 1980.
And then all of a sudden the sky started getting darker and darker, and by 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it was completely dark here, as it was in Spokane and all over. And of course, you had this ash falling, and I think people thought, well, tomorrow we'll get up and it'll melt, it'll go away. It was kind of like, snow. But of course, thank God the sun came up the next morning, and of course, then you had this 5, 6 inches of ash all over town. You'd walk in, it was kind of like an eerie feeling.
The Ritzville area had the most ash in eastern Washington. It's about 195 miles away from Mount St. Helens. That area saw up to 5 inches of ash. Drivers were stranded. Some had to stay in schools and churches until help could get to them.
I don't think anybody really panicked, other than the main concern was the amount of citizens that came into our community that were forced off of the highways, how we were going to get food to those people and take care of them.
3 days later, on May 21st, President Jimmy Carter declared the state of Washington a major disaster area.
It's been one of the most powerful and destructive national and natural phenomena in history.
In Pullman, the WSU campus was covered in ash. Students walked to class covering their faces. Cars kicked up several inches of ash in the streets, making it impossible to see the roads. It almost looks like fresh powdered snow. Following the eruption, President Carter then visited eastern Washington to see the devastation firsthand. Between 1980 and 1986, smaller eruptions would occur at Mount St. Helens, causing some ash to blow, but nothing as significant as what happened on May 18, 1980. In the 40 years since the eruption, the mountain has largely recuperated. It continues to be studied to help scientists understand more about volcanoes and eruptions.
There you go. First time it's seen daylight in 40 years.
WSU's College of Biological Sciences has been storing nearly 100 barrels of volcanic ash ever since the eruption. It's being stored at the Hudson Biological Reserve at Smoot Hill. That's about 12 miles from campus. It was collected from Pullman and Yakima following the eruption. So why is the university storing it, and what are they hoping it's used for? I'll share that story coming up on KREM 2 News at 6 tonight. And we also want to remind you to text us your memories of the eruption from back in May of 1980. Just text us the word events to 509-448-2000 to view other online events as well. All right, Whitley, let's get to our other top stories today. Another county in Washington approved to move into phase 2 of Governor Inslee's Safe Start plan.
Yeah, Mark, that now brings the grand total of counties that are moving into that phase to 10 now, which is good news for those counties. Asotin County, if you take a look at this map, that's the one circled there on the map. Businesses in all of these counties approved to move into phase 2 now have to wait to reopen until guidance has been released for their specific industry on how to keep their workers and the public safe. They still have to comply with all safety and health requirements outlined in that guidance in order to reopen. In the meantime, tonight, the Spokane City Council now wants to adopt a new resolution regarding what needs to happen to keep the city's economy open. Council members are going to be voting on that at their meeting this evening, and KREM 2's Amanda Rowley explains the 5 policy needs that are outlined in that resolution right now.
The Spokane City Council is expected to vote on a resolution that outlines 5 things the city needs in order to maintain an open economy. That is, after Spokane reopens. First, the resolution lists the need for test kits and materials. The city wants to have enough of these to test people with COVID-19 symptoms and those who may have been exposed to an infected person. The city also wants to form a group of people trained for contact tracing. This is a process of identifying people who may have been in contact with someone infected by the virus. The health district would supervise the group along with assigned National Guard members and state employees. They would contact newly identified patients and notify people of their potential exposure. The resolution also calls for a centralized method for obtaining and distributing personal protective equipment to local businesses. That way, they can safely conduct business operations. After Spokane reopens, the city would also like to see public health supervisors to inspect and educate businesses on the best safety practices against COVID-19. The final policy need is to reopen childcare centers. The resolution even mentions the need to support childcare providers through reimbursement for increased cleaning supplies, along with health care, sick leave, and hazard pay. All this until the economy is fully reopened and physical distancing requirements return to normal. This resolution would also declare the city's endorsement of the state's 4-phase reopening plan. It says the city will also continue to work closely with the local health officer and state secretary of health on developing a variance criteria for communities the size of Spokane. Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Still to come tonight, during a protest of the governor's stay-at-home order last week, a tribute to those who have passed away from the coronavirus was destroyed or at least heavily damaged. So coming up tonight, we're going to hear what the man responsible for creating that memorial has to say. But before we take a quick break, we want to continue highlighting all of our local seniors here at KREM 2. So tonight we're giving a shout out to Willow Vaughn, a senior at Riverside High School. She'll be staying local for college. She's going to Whitworth University. So congratulations, Willow, on your future plans. Keep sending in your senior photos because we love making sure to recognize our spectacular seniors. Text 2020 to 509-448-2000 and we'll send you the link on how to submit the senior in your life for some recognition right here on KREM 2. We'll be right back.